Hello everyone, welcome to another draft class recap video. Today we're doing the New York Giants. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Okay, so the New York Giants. Last couple drafts have been pretty interesting and has earned David Gettleman a rash of shit for a couple years. It started with a Saquon Barkley pick where nobody in their right mind believed, at least at the time, that you should be taking a running back number 2 overall in the NFL draft. It hasn't happened for a while. I think the last time we've had running backs come off the board in a lightning fast manner, you had the likes of Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams, Ricky Williams, players like that. I know Ezekiel Elliott was probably the most recent one. I think he went 4 overall when he was drafted. But at the same time, running backs are either boom or bust. Moving on to the next draft, you have Daniel Jones, which was the pick everybody loved to criticize because at 6 overall, they thought that that was impressive to leave Dwayne Haskins out there on the board and take the quarterback from Duke. So he caught a lot of flack for that one. But if you look at the rest of the draft, especially last year, I didn't think it was that bad because you got Dexter Lawrence, Julian Love, O'Shane Ximines. I mean, even at the time, DeAndre Baker I thought was a pretty good pick until we've heard the recent news of him being allegedly involved in circumstances that are just unfavorable. That's a weird story that is still developing, so I don't really want to talk about it just yet because I don't want to be wrong. But at the same time, it's a wild, I don't know what that's about. Weird. So... So I actually think Gettleman does pretty good at drafting the players he wants. He's just pretty terrible at explaining himself. And especially if you remember the post-draft press conference after the Daniel Jones pick last year, where he really couldn't find the words to let the press know of what he was thinking. And really, the easiest ways to do it is just to be like, look, I like the guy, I picked him, what do you want from me? And not saying that I should be doing PR for him, but at the same time, it would alleviate a lot of the criticisms that get punched on him afterwards. So that is that. Let's talk about this year's draft, which I think is pretty good. I would call this draft, I'm not giving drafts grades, but if I were to give them sort of a description, I would call this draft pretty safe. Because it's got a lot of elements that I like as far as getting better in the trenches, getting bigger in the trenches, and getting players to fill key spots that you desperately need. So round 1, pick 4, Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle from Georgia. Considered by many to be the best offensive tackle and most pro-ready tackle in this class. There was a debate early on if he was going to be the first tackle taken between him, Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, and Mekhi Becton. But the 2019 consensus All-American Andrew Thomas was the first name picked, and he will slide in nicely, probably on the right side, I would think, this year, at least for his rookie season. Moving on to round 2, pick 36, Xavier Mckinney, safety from Alabama. No safeties went in the first round this year. That was pretty interesting. A lot of people had, at least early on, the 17th overall pick for the Cowboys, taking Grant Delpit or Xavier McKinney. And then as time moved on and they realized that the safeties weren't the best in this class, a lot of them moved down boards. But I think most people in their mock drafts had at least 1 or 2 between Delpit and McKinney, maybe even Jeremy Chin sometimes. I know I saw Kyle Duggar in there a few times too. But no safeties went in the first round. So Xavier McKinney is the first one off the board. At pick 36, career at Alabama, 175 tackles, 5 interceptions, 15 passes defended. Also pretty good on the blitz, 6 sacks, 13 tackles for losses. Second in the SEC last year in solo tackles with 59, and finished first in the SEC last year in forced fumbles with 4. So he's a pretty hard hitter, and he does get in the backfield, so he can be used in the box, which I like that in a safety. I like box safeties. Moving on to round 3, pick 99, Matthew Pert, offensive tackle from Connecticut. You know, this is kind of like the dream scenario that I would like to see for the Vikings. You get 2 solid offensive tackles with your first few picks and a good safety, but, you know, different teams need different things. As much as I want us to take offensive linemen in the first 2 rounds, it's probably not going to happen for a while. Moving on, round 4, pick 110, Darnay Holmes, corner from UCLA. This pick is good in hindsight because now that we know the things that have happened with DeAndre Baker in recent days, Holmes is starting to look like they got lucky with this. So Holmes, the player, is pretty good. And this is going to be, I'm going to call this the pick that I'm jealous of. We do one of these every draft of which player I would have liked the Vikings to have got. And I think I'm going to say Holmes is going to be the one that I'm jealous we didn't get. 120 tackles, 8 interceptions, 17 passes defended. He can handle kickoff returns. He did that originally when he first started at UCLA, but as time went on, as the years went on, he got away from that. They didn't have them do that as much. I think last year he only returned one, but when he started as a freshman, that was one of his primary duties. All right, so moving on, round 5, pick 150, Shane Lemieux, guard from Oregon. I saw this guy pop up a lot in the mock drafts I was doing leading up to the draft, at about this spot. So that's a pretty good pick for him. Moving on, round 6, pick 183, Cameron Brown, linebacker from Penn State. Finished with 158 tackles, 22 and a half. Oh wait, sorry, that's the wrong player. Finished with 198 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss. Productive linebacker who will fit with them nicely. Then we have 4 7-round picks, starting with 218, Carter Coughlin, edge rusher from Minnesota. I'm going to go with this as my most intriguing player of the draft. Finished his career 158 tackles, 22.5 sacks, 40 tackles for loss. And he finished 14th in the Big Ten in sacks since 2005 with those 22.5 career sacks. Moving on to pick 238, T.J. Brunson, linebacker from South Carolina. 283 tackles, 6 sacks, 21 tackles for loss. And he had a better junior year than a senior year. That's probably why he was picked this low. His junior year, he had 100 plus tackles, 6 sacks. And then this year for his swan song, he only had 70 plus tackles and no sacks. So there was a little bit of a drop off. If he would have come out in the draft last year, he probably would have been picked higher than this. It could absolutely have something to do with injury. I didn't look into it any further. Pick 247, Chris Williamson, corner from Minnesota, transferred from I believe it was Florida he was originally at, but career-wise, 95 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 1 interception, 7 passes defended. Pretty raw talent. He'll need to develop. Moving on, last pick, round 7, 255, Tay Crowder, linebacker from Georgia, 122 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. That rounds out the New York Giants 2020 NFL Draft. It is hot in here, but I felt like this is probably the last day I'm going to get to wear a hoodie. It is what it is. So overall, I feel like this is a very safe draft for the New York Giants. Daniel Jones still has a lot of developing to do, and a lot of the team's success is going to rest on his shoulders. It's interesting that they didn't go after a wide receiver in this, but however, I thought Darius Slay was a very nice rookie last year, and I think he could develop even further in his sophomore season. Plus, they'll get a full year out of Golden Tate. Plus, they still have Evan Engram. Plus, Saquon Barkley should be one of the big focal points of the offense. So I can understand at the end of the day not going for more wide receivers or skill position players on offense. They did what really they needed to do, and that was shore up the offensive line. We've got 2 tackles and a guard, and we also have one of the better tackles, probably the best tackle in the draft, with their number 4 overall pick. I also like the attention to the defense. They're loading up on players, and I think Julian Love, O'Shane Ximenez, Dexter Lawrence I mentioned from last year. We'll see if DeAndre Baker is still part of this team come opening of the season, but as of right now, I don't think so. So Holmes and guys like Brown and Brunson could absolutely contribute. I think Coughlin is probably the most intriguing defensive player. He should definitely push Ximenez for some playing time. And yeah, that's going to do it. So Giants fans, let me know what you think of the draft in the comments, and anything that I probably messed up, which seems to be all the rage nowadays. So thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. New York Jets are next.